Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about how our cells talk to each other. So we're made of so many cells. How do our cells communicate and coordinate? So the skin cells here, when you pinch your skin, you feel the pinching sensation. So how does that message go from all the way over here, all the way to your brain? Here's another example, right? Like here, somebody tells you to eat potatoes, and then you're like, oh, I love potatoes. But you're able to hear what they said and process it, right? So there's sounds, and the sounds go into your ear, and then the ear passes messages over to your brain, and then you might have a response like you eat the potato. So inside of our body, the cells do the same thing. The cells communicate long distance in order to be able to coordinate and do different things. For example, right now, I'm sending a message telling my hand to open and close, right? But where does the message even come from? It comes from my brain. So here's an example, right? So here's a faraway cell, and the faraway cell, maybe it puts some sort of hormone into the blood. And the blood, as you know, travels everywhere. That's why when you get it cut, blood comes out. So the cell sends something called a ligand. Ligand is something that would attach to a receptor, and that's how your cell from far away is able to have a message go to another cell that's far away. So there's going to be three major steps that I'll just talk about briefly first. So the first one is reception. So when that faraway cell sends a message, that's a ligand. Any molecule that attaches to something else is called ligand, right? We learned before examples of ligands would be hormones. So this hormone is attaching to the receptor, and that's how this cell here in this picture knows that a message came in, right? That's reception. Just like you hear a sound, right? But before you even know that there's a sound, the first part is that your ear has to receive that sound. So reception is the receiving of the message, right? The next part is transduction. So after the message is received in some way, transduction is just all the things that would happen that process that message that was received. For example, transduction, when you hear a sound, is that the sound, it touches your ear and vibrates your ear, right? So transduction would be all the steps of passing along that message until it reaches your brain. So transduction inside the cell is all of the events that happened from the moment that the ligand attached to a receptor, all the events that happened that eventually lead to a final response. And so the third part of cell signaling is response. So for example, once all those events happen, then your brain tells you, oh, somebody told you to eat potatoes. And so your response might be you eat a potato now. Okay, so what does reception, transduction, response look like inside of the cell? So we said already, right? One way is for reception is that the ligand attaches to a surface receptor. It's called a surface receptor because the receptor is on the surface. So the cell has protein molecules called receptors to receive messages. And when that happens, the ligand itself is not entering the cell. So sometimes a reaction might happen to create a second messenger. So who's the first messenger? The first messenger would be the ligand itself that couldn't enter. I put in parentheses protein because protein usually is too large or it has a charge and it might be polar. And so that's why it can't just go through the cell membrane and send the message itself. So the ligand is outside, it attaches to a surface receptor. The second messenger is going to carry that message along since this first messenger can't go inside, right? Another way that messages can be sent in is through lipid hormones. So lipids, they can be no charge, and if the lipid is small enough, then the lipid can go directly through the cell membrane, diffuse directly through, and attach to an intracellular receptor. And so it's called intracellular because this receptor is on the inside of the cell, whereas surface receptors are on the outside. So when this lipid hormone, right, lipid ligand, attaches to the intracellular receptor, then the cell will know something has happened, right? And so transduction is talking about the process of transforming this initial received message into something for the cell to act on. So what happens during transduction? There's many reactions that can happen. For example, this reception of this message, right? The receiving of this message can cause a conformational change. Conformational change just means a shape change in some of the molecules inside of the cell. For example, maybe the enzyme was not active before, but now it's activated. Maybe a certain molecule was not built together before, but now it's built together. And it's going to be a lot of different reactions that happen. And then once all those reactions happen, you end up with some sort of final response, right? Just like so many things happen from when your ear vibrates to finally you processing that you heard a sound, right? So many events happen. That's transduction. So I'm not giving you a specific example because it could be anything, right? But the examples I gave you was maybe an enzyme is activated, maybe a molecule is built, but the idea is that there's some change. And transduction is all the different changes that happen because of this initial reception. So all these changes is like a domino effect. Eventually, there's going to be one or two or several final responses, right? So maybe because of this transduction process, now that this enzyme's activated, maybe this enzyme is helicase, right? And so helicase can help separate our DNA apart to start gene expression. And if you watch the other video, you'll know that gene expression is when you use the DNA instruction, one part of the DNA's instruction, in order to send information to the mRNA, and the mRNA then goes to the ribosome, so the ribosome can make protein. So maybe this faraway cell is telling this cell, hey, you should make more enzymes. Or, hey, maybe you should make an antibody, right? Because, so I'll put some examples here. Maybe you need to make enzymes. Example, enzymes, right? To do other reactions or maybe digest food, right? Or maybe here, protein made. It could be like antibodies. Example, antibodies. Maybe the cell needs to go fight pathogens or recognize diseases, right? Or maybe the protein made could be another hormone to send another message to another cell, right? So the response can be many different things, right? It doesn't have to be gene expression. This is just one example of a response, right? Maybe the response is to tell the cell to suicide, right? That would be apoptosis, right? And so in summary, cell signaling is just one cell tells another cell some information. How does the cell get the information? Reception first happens. It has to receive the message, right? Just like you make a phone call, you have to receive the message. The next part that happens is transduction. So a bunch of events occur because the message got received. And then response is the final outcome or outcomes that might happen because of this received message. So using the phone call example, right? Reception would be like you receive somebody's phone call. Transduction would be like all the things that happen inside of the cell phone for you to be able to actually hear what the other person said. And finally, response, when you hear what the other person said from your cell phone, you can have a response like, oh, that video was cool, or oh, I don't want to eat potatoes.